3, 2, 1. Robert Kilgour. You were the founder of Four Seasons Healthcare. You're now the executive chairman of Renaissance Care, and you're also an ambassador for MacMillan Cancer Support. Welcome to the Care Home Show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here, and welcome to the Care Home Show. So, I always find the best place to start with these conversations is to start with where people's journey started. So, tell me, Robert, where did it all begin for you?
In the care sector. When I had a full head of hair, 30 years I've been in the care sector. It started in 1988, opened our first care home, Four Seasons Healthcare, first care home in 1989, May 1989, which is just over 30 years ago.
Wow. Okay. So it's been it's been a professional lifetime, really. It's a good
I've done lots of other things, but I love property and I love people. And there's a lot of property and a lot of people involved in the care home sector. So having got into it completely by accident, I have tried to leave it once. When I exited Four Seasons, I tried to. I had a 3-year non-compete, but actually, and I vowed actually, when I exited Four Seasons, that I wouldn't go in a care home again as long as I lived. But 3 years later, almost to the day, I was back in the care home sector with a care home. So it has a tendency to frustrate you, yes, and it's challenging, but also to drag you back in because of property and people, and those are two great loves of mine, and the sector obviously has that in abundance.
So it's clearly in your blood, Robert. There's something special about it that keeps drawing you back.
Yeah, again, as I say, the best things happen by accident.
So tell me, how did it happen by accident in the initial instance? How did that all come together?
I'd had a hotel in Edinburgh for 5 years. I sold it to move back to Fife, where I was originally from, having had 5 years in Edinburgh, 2 small children, wanted a non-city upbringing for my kids, back to Fife. And it was really a property I bought to turn into a restaurant and 31 apartments. Okay. That there were grants available per flat, that between buying the property and getting the planning permission applied for, the grants were changed, the system was changed.
Oh, okay.
And large grant went, so I was left without able to go down that route because it wasn't going to be profitable for me. So I was left with all my profit from 5 years of my hotel in Edinburgh business ploughed into a property that had no prospect of getting the money out. So I had to say, well,
what do you do now?
What do I do now? And my capital was all in the property.
Sure.
So I had to find something not only that was a way out, but also something that could persuade the bank to 100% fund the development cost, and that my equity was what was there, the actual physical building and land.
Sure.
And that was how it happened. And I had a mutual friend who, or a friend who was an architect in Edinburgh, who knew somebody that had care homes, and he said, you should have a chat to Tom Brown. And so I had lunch with him. He showed me around his care homes. He had 3 in Edinburgh, and he said he would help me with doing making a care home work in the property I had. And I thought, yeah, sounds a way out if I can get the funding. And British Linen Bank, which was a subsidiary, I don't know if it still exists, but a subsidiary of Bank of Scotland, they lent me 100% of the development cost. So I was off and running, and that was when the building work started in 1988. That was technically the start of Four Seasons Healthcare. That was when I chose the name and the logo, and the first Four Seasons Healthcare home opened in Station Court, it was called, in Kirkcaldy in May 1989, and that was the first Four Seasons healthcare home.
And that's where it all started. Got you.
That's where it all started.
So you touched upon the property side and the people side of things around that's kind of why you do what you do. But explain a little bit more around why does that mean so much to you personally?
Well, my father used to say to me, if, as he thought, I would be an entrepreneur from an early age. He thought he was an entrepreneur, so I suppose it takes one to know one. And he was saying, he had a number of sort of sayings of what business advice, which I have to say, a lot of the time when he told me them, they went kind of in one ear and out the other. But over my sort of journey in business, because I've been in business, well, I had a market stall at Ingleston Market when I was 18 selling jeans and T-shirts, and I'm 62 now. So I've been in business in some shape or form for a long time. But his key thing he advised me was, never be afraid as an entrepreneur to surround yourself with people cleverer than you. Mm-hmm. And I've never had a problem with that. So I know some entrepreneurs don't like that and feel uncomfortable with that.
Sure.
I've never had a problem with that. I like being surrounded with clever people in their areas, especially areas where I acknowledge that are not my strongest suit, and that together, and I'm really keen to giving them equity in the business. Mm-hmm. And I've done that in businesses that I've had out with the sector and still do. Mm-hmm. It is important. It's not another one of my father's sayings. It's not the value of a percent. It's not the value of a business. It's sorry. It's not. It's the other way around. It's not the percentage of a business that you have that's important. It's the value of that percentage, and that having 75%, for example, of a business with the senior management having 25% is, in my view, a lot more valuable in pounds sense than having 100% and the senior management not being bought into the programme. And it's really interesting when you... I've had it a few times where you've been sitting around the boardroom table with somebody who's been an employee and a director of the business. And then you have your first board meeting after they become a shareholder. So they're an employee, they're a director, and then you give them some shares. And it's really quite different, their approach to decision making, capex spending, acquisitions, the whole thing. And I love to see that. You can see the engagement with the process and the strategy and the vision. I mean, that's what I do. Is I do strategy. I do the strategy and the vision. I do the funding side in the main. I do acquisitions and disposals, and I do the senior management hires. I'm generally, not all the time, but generally I'm quite good at choosing and bringing on board senior managers. And one of the key things to that is to be honest with them and to be fair with them, and that's something that I'm a firm believer in as well.
You can tell that that's something that it's worked out very well for you and the people that you've worked with, most importantly. So the great piece of advice from your father seems to have paid off.
Yeah, it's not about making the most money or more money. The journey, and especially when you're doing it with people as a team, even if you own the majority of the business. I can assure you at board meetings in businesses that I own a majority, I lose as many arguments as I win, and I never stamp the table or thump the table and say, it's my way or the highway. It's just not. You won't keep good people,
of course,
unless you treat them with respect and you engage them with and it's quite a good market test of. I mean, you may think your strategy and vision is a good idea. But it's really quite a good sort of benchmarking that you have to persuade the team members.
Sure.
You don't just say, this is what we're going to do and get with it or get out. You have to explain it to them, get them on board with it, and deal with the concerns that they have, some of which might be concerns that are misplaced, but equally they might be actually very fair concerns that actually you need to cover that angle. So I do. It's much more fun going on a business journey with a team than on your own, because being an entrepreneur is quite a lonely journey.
Sure.
But doing it with a team is way more fun than doing it all solo. And I've done both, and I know which I prefer. And I invariably, it's a team route that I much prefer doing.
Yeah, no. Again, I can see how that's worked out well for you. And I mean, you only have to look at there's so many other examples of where effectively the founder or the leadership team have had kind of that abundance mindset where they're trying to get everyone to come on the journey with them, where it's paid off in spades. And then you see kind of an organisation where they've maybe had a bit more of a scarcity mindset, and they don't want to, they're not willing to be kind of more open-minded and get people on that journey because it's their way or the highway type circumstances.
I know what I don't like to do, and I know what I'm not good at.
Sure.
And what I don't like is the day-to-day operational side. And the reason is because I'm not good at it.
Sure.
And actually, because I'm not actually qualified. I'm not a nurse or from medical background. So I like hiring very good people for those areas and giving them the support in funding and capex and freedom to giving them the strategy and the vision, but not sitting over their shoulder, micromanaging what they're doing, because you won't keep, again, you won't keep, in my experience, you won't keep good people if you try and do that. And okay, that might mean sometimes things don't go quite according to plan, but in the main, it's far better to have to let them develop and grow. And they'll make mistakes. We all make mistakes. Again, harping back to my father, who used to always say, you'll find that you'll learn a lot more from your mistakes and your successes. And I mean, how...
If there was ever a more true word said.
how true is that? The trick is to actually remember them as time passes. So you don't say, this mistake seems awfully familiar. Oh yeah, 15 years ago I did it. Why didn't I remember that? So that quite often, that has happened before. The passage of time, you can sometimes be a bit selective in your memory, but it's so much more fun doing things, let's say, as part of a team. And this sector is so people orientated that it's tailor-made, in my view, for that, because I still get a buzz from going around. I was around a couple of care homes in Scotland, north of Scotland, last Monday. And I still, after 30 years of going around care homes, I still enjoy going around, and I learn something from each one that I go around. I like to speak to people in the laundry, work in the laundry, or a cleaner. Whatever. You get an interesting perspective. You get if a good idea is a good idea. It doesn't matter whether it comes from a laundry assistant, and it's just as likely, in my view and experience, to come from a laundry assistant as it is to come from in fact, more likely than a manager or an assistant manager or deputy manager. So I do like going around care homes, and I'm frequently annoying my management team by asking permission first, but then taking photographs. I came across a couple of things, a recent care home. I really liked the notice they had on the door of the bedrooms with the name and a potted history and information on the resident who's inside. And I took a picture of it, having asked permission. and sent it round to my senior team. There was one at the same care home I did see that wound up my finance director, because this home had a free to use for relatives and their children ice cream machine.
Okay, nice.
And I had some of the ice cream. It was lovely, but
you'd have to, wouldn't you?
I put the picture I'd suggested, but my finance director sort of had palpitations that they thought of free ice cream for all, and how could he budget for free ice cream for all? And then he sort of said, you know, and that's just in one care home multiplied by, well, at the moment we're operating 14 care homes in Scotland. I think he's a bit worried that, you know, ice cream free for all in each care home times 14, he saw, oh my God, how can I budget for that? So it caused him a little bit of stress, but no, there's lots of new ideas and good ideas out there, and I mean, the day you think you know it all is the day you should pack it in, really, because always learning, always learning.
You've got to be, haven't you? I mean, I think that's kind of part of the gig.
I mean, I'm very fortunate in what I do, I think, because I wake up every morning, including actually, maybe not such a good thing at the weekends, buzzing with ideas, and no one day is sort of routine for me, which is a fortunate position that I've manoeuvred myself into at my advanced years, I suppose. And I love the variety. I get up with, I'm going to tackle these 6 things today, and I might, at the end of the day, have tackled 5 of them, but I've also dealt with another 12 things that came at me from left or right field during the day. And I used to get stressed by that, by not achieving all that I had on my list for that day. And it was my wife, Jacqueline, that got me to look at it the other way around. It's not glass half empty, but glass half full. Instead of looking at the end of the day, oh, I had 10 things to do today, I've only done 6 of them. There's 4 I haven't managed to do. But it's to actually look at what you have done, not what you haven't done, and just move those 4 things on to the next day. And a glass half full attitude has, I'm sure it's been better for my health, but I do, if I didn't get a buzz and bounce out of bed in the morning enthusiastic about tackling the challenges of the day, then I'm very fortunate to be in a position where I don't have to do it, but I really enjoy it. And some of my friends, school friends actually, I was out with one recently, who's a year older than me, but was at school with me at the same time. He was a year ahead of me. He's 63, I'm 62. And he retired last year at 62. And I asked him what he's done in the last year. And he just looked at me and said, nothing. And I mean, I can't think of anything worse.
I couldn't imagine you not doing anything wrong.
I mean, apart from the fact that I think it would be bad for my health.
Yeah, probably.
And I suppose it's topical for the care sector, is that I have read somewhere actually that keeping an active mind is good for dealing with things like potential onset of dementia, etc. But that's not. I mean, the real reason that I keep, my kids do give me a bit of stick. They consider I work too hard and I should maybe look at slowing down. But I really enjoy it. And certainly my wife has said to me, you know, if you think you're going to retire and sit at home with your feet up or something, you've got another thing.
Not happening.
No, it's not happening. She's adamant about that. And actually, that's fine with me. I love interacting with people. We're back to the people again. I love dealing with property. I had a property issue this morning where we got planning refused on something, unfairly I think, but I've already been working on the appeal process and putting that plan into action, because dealing with property, dealing with people, there's lots of positive and fun things involved, but there's lots of challenges and difficulties involved as well. And I like that involvement, both the ups and the downs and the challenges that both having lots of people working for your company and having lots of properties, where there are problems that can throw themselves up 24/7, and you have to be ready and to just deal with them and get on with it.
So, I guess your entry into the world of people and property at the same time was obviously the establishing of Four Seasons Healthcare. You've obviously explained kind of the origin story, if you like, but what were the early days like for Four Seasons?
Well, you tell youngsters today, back to the Monty Python famous sketch about what it was like 30 years ago, and they won't believe you. I mean, we had, in our first care home that opened in May 1989, we had a number of residents bringing their own cars with them and parking in the car park. That's probably the biggest change that I've noticed in 30 years is the greater dependency level of residents, and particularly in the last 10, of those 30 years, particularly in the last 10, huge increase in dependency level of residents. And in some cases, in some ways really, a lot of care homes are, and care homes in general, I feel, are becoming more end-of-life care. And that brings definitely with it its own challenges. And have we got, as a sector, for example, enough palliative care trained nurses and carers to deal with this change? But certainly dependency of residents is something I've noticed a huge change in my 30 years. Shortage of nurses, which didn't seem to be a problem in my memory going back. Regulation. I mean, the local health board sort of paperwork for operating a care home was very small as opposed to what it is now.
Sure.
But that's life. That's something that we've come to accept. So much more regulation, much heavier dependency, leading to issues with type of staffing available, shortage of nurses. A big thing for me was a few years ago, I think it was in 2015, 4 years ago, when George Osborne was Chancellor, and he got rid of nursing bursaries in England.
Sure, yeah.
And he switched them over to student loans. And fortunately, the Scottish Government, Health and Social Care being fully devolved, didn't do that, and they kept the nurse bursary, and they've increased it ahead of inflation actually year on year.
Okay.
And I think it's now, either this year or going to be committed to next year, going to be, I think it's 2020, becomes just over £10,000 a year.
Oh, okay.
And there's been, still is a shortage of nurses in Scotland, but I think it's only about a 3% drop since nurse bursaries in England ended.
Sure.
Whereas in England there's about a 27.5% drop.
Oh, yeah,
so
it's massive, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think there, if I was to, and I suppose it's getting the Chancellor and the Secretary of State for Health together, and if you like, banging their heads together and saying, you know, and sadly it's not an immediate fix, but they really need to bring back nurse bursaries as a matter of extreme urgency, as part of a sort of cocktail of things they need to do to reduce the shortage of nurses going forward, because it's a big problem. Thankfully, from our point of view, Scotland is a little bit better off in that area, as I've explained, than say than England seems to be. But it is something that is a big worry for the English care home sector, I know.
A little bit of a change of gear, but tell me about Renaissance Care and what's going on in your world at the moment.
Yeah, well, I left Four Seasons in 2000. And I had my final financial exit from Four Seasons in 2005. Partly exited in 2000. Finally, the bigger exit was 2005. And I had a few years doing other things. And then 2003, 2004, got back into the care sector again, as I mentioned earlier, and founded Renaissance Care in 2004. And it kind of, I was living abroad at the time, and between Brussels, New York, and other places. And so it just kind of started very slowly. And not till I came back, because I left, my wife and I left the UK. She had a full-time job in New York. I left the UK in 2003. We came back 2010. And it was not till we came back in 2010, mainly for my wife's work in her clients in the city in London, wanted her back in London. And I had a lot of, when I sort of rattled my old network of contacts, particularly amongst landlords that I'd worked with at building up Four Seasons, that we really had there were some worries, obviously, about Southern Cross. And so Renaissance Care really only had 3 small care homes at the time. Then it tripled in size overnight in September 2011, when it took on some Southern Cross homes. And then 2 years later, it doubled again overnight when we took on some Argus care homes, when that went into administration.
Sure.
And since then, it's been a slower growth. And we're now operating 14 homes, only in Scotland, and we're only interested in expanding in clusters in Scotland. But the Four Seasons expansion was in some ways slower, but also quicker, in that between the first home opening in May 1989 and 1997, we went from 1 to 7 over basically 8 years. And then from 1997 to when I left in 2000, we went from 7 to 101.
It's quite a jump.
Which was 7 to 40 on our own, UK-wide, in clusters wherever possible, and then a reverse takeover of a company called Crestacare that was on the AIM listed market.
Sure.
And we took that public to private with the help of Alchemy, the private equity firm, and that took us from 40 to 101 by taking over the 61 from Crestacare, and that was a few months after that, as planned. That was my exit. It was too late to save my hair by then, but my sanity hopefully had a chance. But again, that's when I said, as I said earlier, that I wouldn't go back into a care home ever again. But that didn't last very long.
It didn't, did it? And what was how did you end up with a care home slipping into the portfolio again with in the Renaissance world?
It was property. The 3 small ones that I took on 2000 and sort of 3, 4, 5, they were properties in Edinburgh that interested me. The fact they happened to be care homes, and the fact that an ex-Four Seasons senior manager was looking for something to do, and I was in touch with her. And so I was living abroad at the time. She was able to keep an eye on it. It was 3 small care homes. And it was and they were nice properties. So that was how that happened. It really wasn't till 2010 that I think, from memory, I'm pretty good at these figures, but I mean, we had something like 80 beds between the 3 small care homes, about 95 staff, part and full time, and about a £2.4 million a year turnover in 2009.
Sure.
Our turnover this year, Renaissance Care's turnover, it's about 27 million in the 14 homes, and we've got just over 1,000 staff.
Wow.
And so the first, if you like, the first 6 years, it's really been a huge growth in the last, although we've been going, in fact we're celebrating, Renaissance Care is celebrating, it's my 30th year in the sector we're celebrating, and Renaissance Care's 15th year this year of being in existence. But it really it's been the last 8 years of that 15 that we've seen the growth. And
sure.
I wasn't really up for doing that in 2010 and beginning of 2011, unless I could persuade a few really good people to get on board and join me in that journey.
Sure.
And I was fortunate to do that and get them on board in an equity position too. And only because of that was I up for doing it again. But only right from that period, it was only to be in Scotland.
Sure.
That was something that we discussed, and we felt, for a variety of reasons, and our own sanity probably, because if you've got homes as far afield as Wimpole in the south, or Taunton,
it's a hell of a drive.
to Fakenham,
yeah,
to Inverness, to Peterhead, etc. I mean, it is, and we did that the first time round, if you like, when we were younger and maybe more naive, but a little bit older, wiser, and we just felt that, and it also wasn't about. This time round with Renaissance Care, it's not about trying to build the largest. Mind you, it wasn't at Four Seasons. I think we were the largest in Scotland, but we were 5th largest in the UK when I left in 2000,
sure.
Spring of 2000. But what we've been really keen from the beginning with Renaissance Care is to try and build a strong, medium-sized regional operator. And in some ways, I think that's the future of the sector. I'm really not a fan of the big UK-wide companies. I think it's more trouble to manage than actually it's worth. Strong regional operators is definitely in is where I see the future of the sector, but and I'd like Renaissance Care to continue to grow and become a strong regional Scottish medium-sized business, because we're back to people again, where I think you can give the better staff retention, staff training, staff development.
Yep.
If you've got 5 homes in Aberdeen, then you can give a nurse who's interested in going into management, maybe initially as a deputy manager, maybe an area manager, you can give them that career path and development without them having to move their family or their family's schools. That's why we like the clusters aspect. And we really like doing that in the Edinburgh area, in the Glasgow area in the west, and in the Aberdeen area, is so that we can keep good staff and help them on their staff development. without them having to uproot their families and move, which is
Sure.
not what anybody wants to do. So I really I'm very excited about. I'm still enthusiastic, as you can probably tell, and excited about what the next 5-6 years are going to be. And I've got a great team that I'm working with, and they keep me in check, which is a good thing.
Absolutely.
Entrepreneurs do need to have checks and balances, and I'm no different from that. And I maybe where I'm slightly different is I recognise that I need my checks and balances. Some entrepreneur friends of mine just don't actually feel that they need that, but I most certainly feel I need that, and I really enjoy working with smart people, and I'm fortunate to work with a number in Renaissance Care, as well as the long trusted advisors from lawyers, corporate finance, accountants. I would even, dare I say it, put some bankers in that. I have some. So it's surrounding yourself with, and actually sales agents as well. There's some very hard-working sales agents working for a number of companies that I've worked with on a number of deals, and when I've got the chance, if there's a deal that looks interesting and it's with a particular agent, I know that he will, could be he or she, but the one I'm particularly thinking about, that he will sort of roll his sleeves up, even though he might be acting for the seller, but that, as opposed to me as a buyer, but that he will move mountains to get a deal, to get the deal happen. Because obviously, if the deal doesn't happen, he doesn't get his fee.
Of course.
But equally, best deals are ones that are done slightly off market for all the obvious reasons. But I think he, in this particular case, knows, and most agents know, that funding, which is always a big concern, people talk a good game, but can they deliver?
Sure.
And there's a lot of people out there who talk a good game about looking to buy a care home or a care home group, and then don't have the wherewithal. And so I think my long track record in the sector and credibility of having the funds to be able to do deals means that we do get some interesting opportunities brought to us off market, which allows us to grow. And I'm excited about where Renaissance Care is going over the next 5 or 6 years.
Sure. Sounds like you've got an awful lot of very exciting things going, and it'll be really interesting to see, as you say, what's the business going to look like then. Because
I think the other thing, which again, it's not, my father used to say it, but it's what lots of people say. It wasn't his saying, but it was the one he used, which was you have to work hard, get the balance right, work hard, play hard, but also remember to put something back. And I've always been up for doing that, and I'm, as you know, I was very honoured to be appointed a MacMillan Cancer Support Ambassador in December last year, and I'm really excited working on a number of projects, both UK-wide and Scotland-specific, with Macmillan. One particular one UK-wide is involving the care home sector, so I'm really quite excited about that. Hopefully that will be announced. There's a pilot underway just now. That will be announced in the early spring 2020. There's a Scottish centred appeal to improve the cancer journey for people with cancer in Scotland. I mean, people are surviving cancer, UK-wide, but are surviving cancer. And more people are getting cancer, but more people are surviving cancer. But the figures are that in Scotland there's 87 people every day, 365 days of the year, that are being diagnosed with cancer. And this appeal, the £2 million appeal that I launched in May this year, is for Scotland specifically, with MacMillan, is to improve the cancer journey from diagnosis to hopeful recovery. And it's improving that cancer journey. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the UK-wide initiative, and I also go along and speak at various events as required by MacMillan to, quite often they're business events where there are lots of business people there, and I'm speaking as a businessman who's been involved with MacMillan chairing appeals or working with them on projects for nearly 30 years, and encouraging other business people to maybe get involved. I mean, there was one marking my 50th, which would be when we were starting talking about it. It was in 2006 we started talking about it, and my 50th was 2007. And I said to MacMillan, rather than have a party or some great big sort of blowout, I wanted to donate for my 50th £50,000 to MacMillan for something specific. Did they have something? And they said, well, we have a project that's been struggling to get off the ground, and they're called MacMillan Cancer. We're going to call them MacMillan Cancer Information and Support Centres.
Sure. Okay.
In the sort of large reception lobby areas of hospitals, which were built when those were needed, but they're no longer needed to be that size. And this particular hospital in the Northwich in Harrow, North London, had gifted space in this great big entrance to MacMillan. But MacMillan needed £100,000 to do this work, and the local committee in that area for MacMillan were very nervous about taking on such a large commitment. So I donated £50,000 on, in effect, on a matching basis. And the committee raised the other 50 very quickly, because they knew if they got £200 from you that they were getting £200 from me. And so that opened in 2007.
Sure.
And I was there at the opening, and 2.5 years later, the middle of 2009, I said to them, if you've got one back in my birthplace in Edinburgh, then at some point then I would be happy to help on the same basis. And so I think it was £60,000 was the cost of the one at the Western General, and I donated £30,000 for that, for the half the cost of doing that, and that was the 25th one.
Wow!
So in 2.5 years, from when I prime pumped, if you like, the first one, and they asked me a few weeks ago to go and rededicate. It's been slightly refurbed. The one in Edinburgh at the Western General, which is marking its 10th in December this year, 10th anniversary of when I went and officially opened it. And I asked them, as I was prepping in my head of what to say at this relaunch, how many are there UK-wide now? And they told me 161.
That's astounding, that is.
And 12 years on from when I made possible, or helped make possible, the first one, I'll be rededicating, if you like, another one. But there are 161 of these throughout the UK, and so that's part of, fine working hard. And yes, if you don't work hard and you don't fortunate enough to make some money, you can't support and donate money to these worthwhile causes. But another saying that my father used to have is, you'll find that if you're fortunate enough to have some success and make some money, you'll find that it's a lot more fun to give money away to worthwhile causes while you're alive than after you're dead.
Of course, yeah.
But it sounds rather a silly or a stupid comment to make, but actually,
a good point made, though,
it is a good point, because I've seen the first one, I've seen the 25th one, and I'm going to be rededicating that 25th one in a few months, well, couple of months' time. And to know that there are 161 today live throughout, that's a huge, and that motivates me hugely in the business side.
Sure.
Because without the business success, you can't support the charities that you like supporting.
Sure.
So, and it does give you a better balance. That's not all. I mean, whatever they say about all business makes Jack a dull boy or whatever. But I do believe that, and I encourage my kids in a much in an early stage, in a smaller way, that just work without being involved in some kind of charitable work. My youngest daughter has been out and painted schools and whatever in Uganda.
Oh wow, okay.
And it's that kind of, and that I have to say, I've noticed quite a difference in her since, in her whole kind of thinking. And she's now saying she's ambitious to be successful, but she wants, which is I think like that mid-20s generation. She's 25, but she wants to be successful and having her own social enterprise.
Okay, that's interesting.
Which I think is really interesting. Not, I want to be successful in business to make money, to then give money to charities. She's slightly doing it differently. She really wants to be successful. And she's worked in the city for a few years, and she's now left that to look at setting up her own social enterprise using what she's learnt in the city. And that's where her ambition is to have a successful social enterprise. So her business and her charitable work, if you like, is going to be sort of combined into the one, as opposed to I very much have it separated. But I'm very proud of the fact she wants to do that, and will be no doubt asked to make a small contribution to the process. But that's fine. I'm very proud of them. Very proud of them all.
So. Another slight change of gear, and thank you so much for explaining about it. It's good to hear about your philanthropic contributions to the world just as much as your entrepreneurial one. So, as somebody who effectively you are seen as a commentator on the sector, obviously people come to you from the mainstream media and from the sector media to kind of understand your perspective on things. I'd be interested to hear, well, from a political, from an economical, from all sorts of different perspectives. We're experiencing, let's say, challenging times and uncertain times in many ways. Give us an overview on what's your perspective on the kind of current state of play, if you will.
Well, on the sector, I mean, I'm the same as a lot of people involved in the sector. We're fed up being a can that's being kicked down the road. We feel as a sector that we do a very valuable job, and actually from a taxpayer's point of view, a very good value for money for the taxpayer. Unlike what a lot of local councils do, I suppose that's for another day, because that would take up an entire time. But it does bug me that local councils spend huge amounts of money building their own care homes and running their own care homes, and I consider that to be a misuse of public funds, actually, when they could provide a lot more care home beds a lot cheaper by engaging more with the care home sector. But I'm worried about the local government and national government not acknowledging the great contribution the sector makes, and not being prepared to pay the true cost of care. It really annoys me that they won't do that. And I mean, more and more care homes we're losing more care home beds on an annual basis. We are in Scotland, and we are I understand UK-wide, including in England. And particularly if you strip out the homes that are being built, particularly in the south of England, that are 100% for the private market.
Mm-hmm.
And also a lot of care home operators, and I'm afraid we're no different at Renaissance Care. We're having to look at, everybody's looking at every single bedroom, floor, wing of a care home that they have, and seeing if they can move it to specialist care or to private funders, because too much of a reliance on local authority funders is a road to ruin.
Sure. The
way it currently is being done. So it does worry me, and that flows into the political uncertainty that we have, that we're currently dealing with Brexit and the rest. I think I would certainly be in favour of having, not that my opinion carries any weight, but having a general election to try and get some more certainty to be able to push a Brexit deal through and move on to what everybody accepts are the most important, while the ongoing trade negotiations, because all we're talking about with the Brexit deal that we were trying to get through, well, the government's trying to get through, is that the divorce, the kind of, in percentage terms, it's probably 10%
of the whole
whole thing.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, this is not, I can't remember how Churchill did it. It's not the end of the beginning or the beginning of the end, but it is very much the small part of it. The trade agreement and the detail of the trade agreement and trade relationship is, you know, if you like, 90%.
Yeah.
And we haven't got to that yet. I mean, it's perhaps a bit more flushed out now than it was maybe 6 months ago, but there's still lots of areas there to be negotiated. So once we get over this first initial hurdle, while the trade negotiations are battling on, a new government needs to have a majority that it can actually get its teeth into issues around health, social care, education, defence, everything else, policing, because a lot of these issues have been very much pushed into the corner or on the back burner, and I would liken social care to be one that's been put in a pressure cooker and stuck at the back of the kitchen, hoping that it's not going to blow up until you get round to dealing with it, and it is bubbling away there quite aggressively, and so it's about getting a deal done, get on with the trade negotiations, and that should allow government ministers to focus more on the day-to-day issues, the NHS, social care, education, policing, etc., which have been have not had the attention that they've deserved over really since the referendum. But what happens with the because I'm in favour of having a general election, and annoying as it might be to have one in December, I think the sooner we have one the better. So hopefully we'll find out in the next 24 hours if we're going to have one in December. It would be good to have that, try and have some clarity and certainty to move forward. We've got an extension to the end of, or flex extension as they're calling it, to the end of January, and we can just get on and get, because making investment decisions in any sector, and the care home sector is no different. Making investment decisions is tricky when all this is
so much hangs in the balance.
Yeah, but I also have a view that I'm a finance director and I have these discussions on a regular basis. That he says, should we be taking account of this or this eventuality, or allowing for this potential eventuality? I say no. We have to focus on what we know that we're dealing with today, and we've got plenty of problems due to regulation, shortage of nurses, funding issues, not being paid the true cost of care. We've got plenty of problems that are real and present today.
Yep.
Let's focus on our efforts on dealing with those until we know, are we going to have a Brexit? What kind of Brexit?
Yep.
And what is that going to affect? I mean, one of our biggest concerns, and I know there'll be people that have a lot more or a lot less, but we did a staff audit recently, and about 30% of our 1,000 staff are non-UK.
Okay, sure.
With about half of that being the rest of the EU.
Sure.
And half being the rest of the world. So you could argue that actually of 1,000 staff, 150 are rest of the world, so they won't see much of a change. It's 150 that are from the rest of the EU
Sure.
that potentially see a change. And what should we be doing, what should we not be doing? Well, one of the first things we're doing is we're putting an arm around those 150 and making them feel welcome and valued, make sure that we don't lose them and that they stay.
Sure.
And once we know what the playing field's going to be going forward, immigration controls, etc., then we can look at what part that plays going forward. But it's about focusing on trying to, stressing about problems and issues that are above your pay grade, which I feel a lot of them, the issues to do with Brexit, are certainly above my pay grade. But focus on the ones that you can, that are within your control to have an impact on and to do something about.
Sure.
And are real and present today. There are enough challenges for the sector that are real and present today without
worrying about the stuff that might not happen.
Might not happen, or adding this. I mean, if you, it's back to glass half full, glass half empty, I suppose, again, is, would you get out from under the covers in the morning if you thought too much about what could happen?
Of course.
Rather than just get out there and get out of the covers, get on with it, and there'll be ups and downs, but just embrace it, because I'd rather be out there fighting the fight for the sector. And you pointed about, I do put my head, and sometimes not necessarily, it doesn't always end well, but ending well for me is not the point. But I do, when asked to comment, I do tend to comment honestly. I can perhaps on some occasions, I'm not as diplomatic as maybe some of my other directors might want me to be. He said, "Oh no," one of them might say to me, "Oh no, maybe you shouldn't have said that," or whatever. But I think there is a need to put our head. A lot of my fellow care home operators too don't like putting their head above the parapet. But maybe it's just my nature. But I'm quite happy to do that, and I'm really quite proud of what, in a selfish way, I'm quite proud of the job that Renaissance Care does, but I'm really quite proud of the job that the care home operators do in the sector does. And I think we should be more vocal about what we do, which I think is in very much in the main a very good job in very difficult circumstances. I don't think we get enough credit for that, and I don't think we also shout about it enough. We don't tend to like, not saying shouting about it's a good thing, but actually to speak out. We tend to just take the blows without necessarily saying, wait a minute, you know, we're not perfect, but we actually don't do too bad a job.
That's a good point, and a great segue to what I was going to ask next. But as a sector, what do you think that we do well, and where do you think that we've got real opportunities for improvement?
Well, I mean, I'm a great fan of Donald McCaskill in Scottish Care and Martin Green in England with Care England, and the excellent work they do. And Donald's got some really good people, as has Martin, supporting them. And I think it is important to work through bodies like that. But we need to be prepared to evidence-based argument about why we should be paid, and it's in the taxpayer's interest to pay us the true cost of care. I mean, bed blocking is getting worse in Scotland and in England, and part of that, a large part of that, is due to too many care homes closing, not enough being built, particularly in the local authority. Because although if you look at the straight number of beds being built, number of beds closing, it doesn't look quite as bad, but if you drill down into those numbers,
it's disproportionate relevant to the
ones that are being built for the private sector, and the ones that are closing are in the main local authority, and so it's actually worse than the initial figures, and people don't necessarily drill down. So I think that's important, and that leads to more bed blocking, which means if you and I need to go in for an operation on a dodgy knee or hip or something, our operation is quite likely to get cancelled 3 or 4 times. I mean, I hear of relatives of mine having operations cancelled, you know, all the time. And it's something that bed blocking leads to cancelled operations because there are too many elderly care who should be either at home with home care packages in, or in care homes. Much better places for them to be, as well as being considerably cheaper to the taxpayer. But you've got NHS budget and you've got local authority budgets, and they're not combined. I mean, I think ultimately, and I think Manchester's the largest experiment in that combining of the budgets, although it's still at a relatively early stage to see how that works. But combining health and social care budgets together into one, because then you get the hospitals keen for people to move out, but local authority social work budgets not wanting somebody to come out of hospital, and is that because they're better off in hospital? Invariably, in my experience and my view, and I've seen a few examples of that recently with relatives, that there's nothing that the hospital can do for them. They need to be either at home with home care in, or in a care home. But the social work departments of the local authorities involved are dragging their heels, because as long as they stay in a hospital bed, which costs you and I as a taxpayer a lot more money, but it's not coming out of their budget. And until you have that joined up writing, and I would like to see a cross-sector cost of care review, voluntary sector, local authority, and the independent sector, and the NHS as well, a long-stay elderly ward costs, so that we can see where, if there is some more funding available, that it can be targeted to where the best value for money is for the taxpayer. But until you actually know and have a cost of care review.
You haven't got a benchmark as to where to start with the whole conversation.
And where, if there is money available,
where does it need to come from?
Where is it best to be targeted? And so any opportunity I get, I lobby unofficially. I mean, I don't get paid for doing it. I'm not wanting to get paid for it. But if I happen to find myself standing next to somebody of influence in any government position, I'm very happy to put my tuppence worth in that this is what you should be doing. I mean, we have a thing in England called, we have it different in Scotland, but in England called the Better Care Fund, which is meant to be joined up writing between the local authority budget and local government budgets and the health budget. But it's not, it's been revamped at least once, if not twice, and it's not really doing the job. In patches it has had success, but it's not been a huge success. Sure. I really have hope, and I like the idea in Manchester. Andy Burnham's ex-Labour MP and, in fact, Secretary of State for Health, is the current mayor in Manchester. So he, not just being the mayor of Manchester, but he's an ex-health secretary. He
gets it a bit better.
Yeah.
You'd like to think, at least.
You'd like to think he does. And he's I've met him on a couple of occasions, very, I think, intelligent, practical guy. I certainly liked what I heard. I think he's we've got the right person there in the right position in a big city, and it's Greater Manchester across that whole area.
Sure.
But ultimately, I would see health and social care budgets needing to be completely combined as one of the key, getting nurse bursaries back, getting health and social care budgets completely merged into one. There are a lot of things that can be done. It isn't just a case of more money needs to be spent, need more money. Spending the money in a smart way is almost, I think, more important than more money. And I think there are some smart and not small changes. I mean, that's a big change. But until we have a bit of political stability and clarity and a government with a majority that can actually tackle these issues beyond what's the next Brexit crisis that needs to be kicked down the road to the detriment of issues that really do need attention, like with social care and NHS funding being a large one.
Be interesting to learn more about that Manchester pilot.
Yes.
Tell me, Robert, you've obviously led a handful of companies now. What are your greatest leadership lessons?
Greatest leadership lessons. I mentioned it before. Don't be afraid to surround yourself with people cleverer than you. I mean, I know my own strengths, but I know my own weaknesses. And so I like to surround myself with clever people in areas that are not my best forte. And taking people with you. It's not, a diktat thing. It can be hugely frustrating. You own most of the company, you know where you want it to go, and it takes time and persuasion to persuade your senior managers that is the right direction to go in, rather than say, this is what we're doing, guys and girls, let's just do it. It's a consensus thing, which can sometimes be a little frustrating, but you have to take people with you in we're a small company, Renaissance Care, and yet we've got 1,000 employees across so many different, a wide range of disciplines.
Of course.
But that's quite a big payroll. But we're still, we're only £27 million turnover. And so you have to, in that kind of ratio, you really have to take people with you. Yes, you have to have a strong strategy and a strong vision, and it's certainly something that is one of my strengths, is having that. How successful I am at persuading the senior managers sometimes. Sometimes I think I do it well, other times I'm more critical of and feel I haven't managed to get the message across. But definitely in a people business, which the care home sector is very much a people business, you need clear strategy, clear vision. And if you provide that and don't micromanage good staff, then things can go well. I mean, that's just how my personal management style. Other people are equally as successful with different management styles, but it seems to work for me. I don't sweat the small stuff. I try and look at the bigger picture stuff, and have the people, the engineers of the business, if you like, who deal with the nuts and bolts. One, they like that, and two, they're way better at it than me, and that seems to work. But you need to. Am I an entrepreneur, or am I a businessman, or am I both? What is the difference? I will say I do think that I'm probably unemployable. My wife worked for a big. She worked for Citigroup at a managing director level when they had 300,000 staff worldwide, and she was part of the 1% club, which was the top 1%. So there were just 3,000 of them worldwide, and but I don't think I would have lasted 24. She's more generous. She reckons 48 hours. But the kind of corporate where, 75% of her job, I thought anyway, felt that 75% of her job was office politics, and 25% was
getting on with the day job.
Was getting on with the day job. I try, and it is more difficult as the business grows, to that highest percentage of myself and my senior team's time that we're trying to avoid office politics and focus on the vision and strategy and drive the business forward, and keeping office politics a minimum. Now I know that becomes, but then I've also come across when we've bought, say, a family care home group of, say, 3 care homes that with, say, 150 beds or something and 200 odd staff. There's been huge office politics in there between the family dynamic, between brother and sister. You see
it so often, don't you?
Yeah, so it isn't office politics taking over what's best for the business is not purely a sort of thing that happens with growth. It can happen in a small, but wherever it happens, it holds the business back, whether it's a small family-owned business or a larger business. And yes, we need policies and procedures and all that. That's absolutely essential. I admit, I try and keep out of that sort of area because it affects my sort of vision and strategy. But you need it, and you need it. And the other thing, I remember that if you're growing a business in the sector, and it's more so now than when I grew, more important now than when I grew 4 Seasons. It was a different time, a different economic climate. and I never forget, we had one incident where, or it was something that was ongoing. Our management accounts at Four Seasons at that huge expansion time, we were getting as a senior management team, we were getting our management accounts 6 to 7 weeks. Now, I mean 6 to 7 weeks after the month end.
How do you work with that?
We were lucky we didn't go under. It was purely, we were in a growth market. The banks were gung-ho for the sector. But in the current climate, wouldn't work. And we get our management accounts, or I get the management accounts, I get Monday morning information every Monday, by Monday lunchtime usually, on occupancy in each of the homes, to budget, etc., use of agency graph, how that's been in the previous 7 days. And then the monthly management accounts I get on the 15th of the month following.
Sure.
And as you expand, what we did at Four Seasons is that we expanded, and then the sort of financial control and reporting came as an afterthought. Whereas when we've done the expansion we've done since 2010, I said back in 2010, and I'm saying again now to the guys as we do our next growth leap, we must invest in the infrastructure for financial control and reporting ahead of the expansion, not behind. Because unless you get that right, you're toast.
Things are going to start going
so
wrong.
That's a big change, actually. That's another change. You could get away with it 25 years ago or so. You can't get away with it now, and quite rightly so. And so you need to have that. And obviously computers and capability has moved on a huge amount. Although an interesting one at a care home I visited recently, that was, and all our care homes are now Wi-Fi throughout. And that's something that is key going forward, I think. Not just for allowing residents to FaceTime their relatives in Australia, South Africa, Canada, US or whatever, but also the use of e-technology on handheld things like this for allowing, including the maintenance staff, the activities staff, carers and nurses to have one of these that they can run, and the activities organizer takes 8 people out on a trip, can just tick the 8 people and press send to their care plan, and it goes, rather than find a time when the manager isn't in her office or interviewing or whatever to go get the 8 different files out and do the paper.
Sure.
Now, that is not going to save. Moving to that technology is going to cost money, not save money. But it's not a saving money exercise. But that activities organizer will be able, doing without that paperwork and all that procedure, will be able to spend more time organising and with the residents. So the quality of care will improve.
Sure.
It's not, by doing that electronically, that has, the e-care plan staff has a cost, but we'll get that, some of that or all of that cost back by cutting down the number of hours the activity coordinator a week that you spend on that. Absolutely not. It's not. It's a way to improve the outcome, the quality of care that the residents in your charge, in your care, can have, and that excites me. So new technology is good, but it's not. I don't see it as a money-saving exercise. I see it as being able to the activities coordinator be able to sit down with the relative and talk about, well, you haven't been on any of our trips recently. What is it you would like to do? Let's, it's giving them more time.
It's an investment in quality.
To sit and chat. So I'm excited about the Wi-Fi. But I went to visit a care home recently that was brand new and had not been the old system and then Wi-Fi e-care plans. It had a Wi-Fi problem and it had 11 residents waiting to come in.
Sure.
But it couldn't take any of them in because it had there's no backup system.
Right,
so
sure.
Technology is, as we all know, it's great.
Only when it works.
When it works. For us older people, it's one of the best things about having children is that you have an in-house technical support team that you can rely on. But it's certainly it's the way it's going, and I know health and social care across the board have been very slow and reticent in some ways at engaging or taking on board new technology. It's nothing new. It seems to have been something that's been there. You know, health and social care, we don't like tech, and that's from NHS to care home sector. But we are getting it more, and we are getting there, and we're going to have to embrace it. As I say, I don't see it as it's going to save money or improve your bottom line, but it will certainly improve the quality of personal care that you can give, which is something that has got to be a higher priority going forward.
Definitely, definitely. I know we're on a probably fairly similar page with all of this, but how important do you believe that culture is within company culture is within an organisation, especially a care business?
We're back to a clear strategy and vision. We're a people business. We had our Renaissance Care Annual Awards about 6 weeks ago, and I was quite rightly limited to 5 minutes of speaking, which is fine because it's their night for their awards and to let their hair down afterwards. But I did, in my 5 minutes, say that this is a people business and that they are the people that make this business work. And it's getting them to, from all levels of staff, to buy into the strategy and vision and journey that we're on about being a good quality, a provider of good quality care, looking after the vulnerable elderly residents that are in our charge, and also allowing, not all members of, people forget this, not all members of staff want massive career development, but allowing each member of staff to do, and at the pace they want to do as much or as little career development. And it's something that I'm passionate about, and I'm hoping that at some point in the next year or so that Renaissance Care will be able to open its own training academy. And it's something that I'm really passionate about, because staff development, I mean, that is certainly very common sense, and you could argue does flow to the bottom line, is if you've got happy staff, you'll retain more of them. Word of mouth, you'll recruit more. So, it's a bit of a no-brainer, but you have to believe in it and do it. And it's kind of, if you do that, the benefits will come.
Of course. You
can't sort of say, well, I want to, you have to actually believe in it. But it's a type of business that I want to be involved in and to head up. It's a business that is going above and beyond for the staff, and without the staff and giving them the opportunity to learn and grow at the pace or to the extent that they want to, not forcing them to do it. It's very much key to how I see us being able to grow. But you need to be of a size sufficient size to be able to afford to do that, and that's what we're working towards. Because we're back to my finance director again, is that until we're of a sufficient size, probably around 30 homes, we've sort of agreed that we won't be able to afford, until we're that sort of size, 30 homes or so, to have that kind of to have our own training academy. But that's a real strong wish and desire for the future, and I'm really excited about us being able to do that. I
look forward to seeing that. That'll be good. If you had one piece of advice for somebody at any level wanting to make a positive impact on, excuse me, on the care sector, what would that one piece of advice be?
Well, I think if you don't like, you have to like people to be in this business. So if you don't like people, then you're in the wrong. Perhaps you should be doing something else. So you have to like people. You have to care. I mean, you have to care, and that goes right the way through the business, including at the top level. And you have. I mean, it is hard, challenging work, and sometimes when I do say, oh, so much stuff on my to-do list and whatever, and I think about the hundreds of staff that I've got that work day in, day out, looking after vulnerable elderly. I'm very proud of them, and I see it as my responsibility to try and take some of the weight off and give them the tools to do the job, whether that's more capex on more equipment or new carpets, curtains, furniture. So they're the people that matter, and unless you and it's a team. It's a team thing. If you're a solo sort of person, maybe that's not, again, for you. You have to be a team player. You have to care. So a team player, people person, you have to care. And I think it is, challenging as it is, I still think it's hugely rewarding at all levels, and it's the best thing that we as a company do, that Renaissance Care as a company do, is have our annual awards.
Sure, yeah. I bet that's great fun.
And it's when you read out, and I'm up there doing what I'm told, being given the list of the nominees, and you're reading out the nominees, and the noise that comes from the White Craig's table, or the Tory table, or the Glencairn table, and then the hooping and hollering, if you like, for one of the better words for it, that when you announce the winner. It really means a lot to them. It's a lot more than just a job, and I'm really proud of being a part of an organisation that has that kind of passion. I mean, they really do have a passion, and when some of the stories of why these people have been nominated are read out, and these are comments from relatives that have been put in to nominate this person for going above and beyond. It does. It makes me feel very proud, but also inspires me in my small bit that contributes to the overall picture. That I always come away from those evenings and say, Kilgour, you need to buck your ideas up. Just get. There's more that you can do to support these great people. Sure. I mean, it's just fantastic. So, any company of a medium size that doesn't, for example, have its own internal kind of group-wide awards evening, I would strongly recommend that you do it. We do provide a free bar afterwards, which my finance director does get stressed a bit when the amount year by year
slowly creeps up.
Yeah, it seems to creep up. But it's the best thing we do, and it's not just the best thing for the staff. All the senior managers are there and whatever, and we really get affected by their enthusiasm and their passion. And you're saying, God, these guys are so enthusiastic and passionate about it. We've got to match that in what we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's such a driver. It's a challenging but hugely rewarding sector. And I would, you have to be that right type of
person.
Yeah, you have to be. If you're not, there's plenty of other things. But if you are, it's very, very rewarding, and I see that. I go around lots of care homes, both my own and others, and I see that in other people's care homes too. You can spot you can tell good staff, in a heartbeat. And I was visiting one on Saturday morning, just past, and there were a couple of staff that jumped out as really special, and that was in a competitor's care home that a relative of mine was in, and I went to visit him, and I was hugely impressed.
You feel the energy coming off them.
That's the one that has the ice cream machine.
Got you. You've obviously mentioned your father quite a few times. He was clearly a very wise man. He clearly imparted an awful lot of great advice to you. But
not that I thought that at the time necessarily. There's always that. There's that friction But you're not going to ask me if I think that I'm doing that similar job with my kids, because I'm not really sure that would be. You'd have to ask them.
I'm sure you are on some level. So, what out of all the great pieces of advice that you've been given, what do you think the best piece of advice is that you've ever received?
Well, it's something he used to say to me a lot, but it's a combination of two things, and both of them are really used by lots of people. I mean, a key one of his was that, this is not a dress rehearsal. This is it.
This is it. This is the real deal.
This is it. This is it. So, make it count.
Yep.
And work hard, play hard, but never forget to put something back. And that really encapsulates it. That is what I try and pass on to my 4 kids, with sometimes success, sometimes, but it's early days yet. But I mean, I was fortunate to have a chunk of time with my father while he was still active in business and I was starting off in business. That was quite a good, we did have 10 years where he was active in business and I was starting up in business. So we had lots of arguments about things, And I have to say, and it sounds a bit, not morbid, but when I'm making a big decision today, and my father died 27 years ago, I still do have a little conversation with him in my head.
Sure. What would Dad do type thing?
Yeah, and what would he say? He said, bite their bloody hand off. You know, that's a good price. Stop mucking around, bite their bloody hand off.
Mm-hmm.
Or another one they used to have, which in some, I have had that conversation with them and taken that advice, is that sometimes the best business decision is saying no.
Sure, yeah. Damn right, yeah, it's very true.
And walking away,
Mm-hmm.
and that just say no if you're not got that. Use a great gut feeling. I know that's not, you know, gut feeling. What's that? You know, but if it doesn't feel right, just say no. Just walk away, and because no can sometimes be the best business decision to make on a particular deal. So not being afraid. It's key not to be afraid to say no, even if you've had a lot of time, effort, and money probably invested in getting a deal to a particular point. Mm-hmm. You have to be prepared, I think, to do that. But another thing that he was quite interested in, and I have done it all the way along and still do it to this day, is having non-exec director involvement in companies and sectors that are out with your comfort zone.
Okay.
It's quite good to have that
Outside perspective type thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is quite good, and that's, otherwise you can be too. I think it is important to do that. I've been non-exec director and then subsequently non-exec chairman of a local radio station company in Scotland. I've been non-exec director of a number of companies, and still I'm a non-exec director of several companies at the moment in sectors that are out with my comfort zone. One is a technology company, which my son particularly, as a product design engineer, masters, he's got his 2-1 masters from Glasgow in product design engineering, and he scratches his head about me having a third ownership of and being non-exec director of a technology company. He finds staggering, because if I get a new TV, he's the first person I have to phone about how to work the remote.
Sure.
But it's quite good. Again, it's about, I think, doing whatever to keep the little grey cells going. Mm-hmm. Is good. I have, what are my, not regrets, but one of my things that I keep saying to myself, I did go for a run yesterday. It was quite sunny yesterday, and in the morning particularly, I went for a run, mm-hmm. which I like going for a run in the sunshine, fresh air, mm-hmm. exercise, good thinking time. I really wish I could get back, or not say could, I want and desire to get back to doing, not becoming an exercise sort of fanatic, but doing more exercise is something that is on my to-do list.
Because
because I think being a bit healthier and a bit fitter will, you could argue, allow me to continue doing both being active in business and following from that, active in charitable giving for longer. So. But that's certainly something I've not got the balance between work and exercise correct at the moment, and I'm quite determined to try and get that, mm-hmm. Because that's important.
Balance that we all have to battle with, but you've been extremely generous sharing your time, your insights, and your knowledge. So, Robert Kilgour, an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for
my pleasure. I enjoyed it. It's always good to speak to young people.
Well, thank you very much, sir, and you're welcome back anytime. So, Robert, an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.